In this video, I'm going to show you the 10 mistakes that I see pickleball players at all levels making, and I'm going to show you how to fix them so that you play better and win more games. The first mistake players make is that they don't communicate with their partner. So there's 4 easy ways that you can communicate with your partner to reduce confusion when you're on the court. And the first is when you are playing and you want to take the ball, maybe there's a shot down the middle, you should say mine. So sometimes the ball comes right down the middle and you and your partner need to decide who's going to take it. So by saying mine when the ball is in the air, like this, mine, that tells your partner to not go for the ball and your paddles won't collide. On the flip side, the second way to use communication with your partner is to say yours. So the exact opposite of what I just did. If the ball's coming down the middle, I could say yours, and then Kennedy will take that shot in the middle. So the way that would look is we're both standing here and I say yours. Kennedy goes for that middle ball and we both know who's going to take it. The next way that you can communicate with your partner is you can say stay or watch out or go when you hit a third shot or you're trying to move forward. So if I hit a really bad third shot drop that's too high, I could say watch out to Kennedy, and then she knows not to run in, because if she runs in there, she might get killed when she's at the kitchen. So I could say stay or watch out in the situation like this, and then she knows to stay back. On the flip side, if I have a really easy drive, I could say go, and that tells her to run in, where she can maybe go for a shake and bake or just pounce on that next shot and be super aggressive. So a lot of this communication takes place on the third shot when you're serving, so the shot right after your serve, so that you and your partner know the best way to strategize so that you can win the point. The next mistake players make is they take their eye off the ball while they're hitting it. So you might not have known this, but when you're hitting a shot, you want to keep your head completely still. So if I'm hitting a forehand, I don't want to be looking away from the ball as I'm hitting it. My vision should actually stay completely put on where I'm hitting the ball as I'm hitting it. So if I hit Kennedy a shot, you'll see that her head doesn't move, and she actually is watching where she hit the ball after she hits it. So a little thing I like to tell my players is to take a photo of your contact point with your mind before you look away. You don't want to look away as you're hitting it like Kennedy just did, because when you do that, you might miss the sweet spot and you'll just hit a worse shot. So it's totally fine to be looking at the contact point of where you hit the ball a little bit after you hit it, because you have some time, right, to react to your opponent's shot, especially if you're at the back of the court. So this applies to every shot, whether you're hitting a dink, whether you're hitting an overhead. Regardless, you want to keep your eye on the ball right after you hit it, not just when you're hitting it, and you're going to hit more consistent, cleaner balls. And guys, while it's important to look at the ball, right now I also want you to look at the subscribe button, because right now we're trying to become the first channel in pickleball history to reach 250,000 subscribers. So if you want to help us make history, make sure to click subscribe. And if you want to spread this video around and grow the game, make sure to like the video while you're down there too. The third mistake I see way too many players making is they're stiff wristing their serve, which gives you less power. So what I mean by stiff wristing is they're hitting their serve. So you may be hitting your serve with a steady wrist that looks like this, which in the beginning, if you're just starting out, is a great way to be consistent. But if you want to get the most possible power, you need to be using something called the flashlight technique, which looks like this. So what the flashlight technique is when I'm hitting the serve, I want to be leading with my butt cap. So the butt cap is the bottom of the paddle. When I'm going to hit the ball, you want to be leading with your butt cap so that your wrist can snap through a little bit when you make contact with the ball. So when you do that, your power is way more effortless. So you can hit way harder serve without having to try as hard, because your paddle's functioning more like a whip. So you don't even really need to swing as hard as you can to hit a much harder serve than you would with that stiff wrist. So when you're hitting your serve, I highly recommend using a super loose wrist so that you can lead with your butt cap and then extend your paddle through a little bit on contact. The next mistake I see players making is they aren't moving like an athlete. So while you're playing, it can be really easy to become too focused on what you're doing with your hands. But in order to play the best pickleball, you need to be extra focused on what you're doing with your legs. So I see a lot of players moving like this. They're standing straight up. They're not on their toes. And at a low level, this can be effective if you're good with your hands and you have good touch. But to play at a high level, a 4.0 plus level, you need to look like an athlete, or else you're gonna get off balance and you're not gonna be able to do as good of a job with your shot. So what does moving like an athlete entail? The first thing is, between every shot, you wanna get back to this sort of position where you have a wide base, bent knees, and you're on your toes. So watch as I'm in a rally, I always move back to this position after every single shot, because this is the best position for me to react from. You don't want to be high like a school bus, you want to be low like a Ferrari so that you can move side to side and you don't lose your balance and you're able to stay poised and in a good position when you're stretched. So to show you one more example, I can hit a drop, you come in, and I'm ready for these harder shots because I'm low. I'm not high and off balance. The next thing you want to keep in mind is when you're moving forward, you always want to jump into a split stance before every single shot. So if I have a reset, I want to jump into that split stance because that essentially signifies that I'm ready for the shot. What I don't want to be doing is I don't want to be moving forward as they're hitting the shot, because then I might not be in the best position to react. If I have one leg in front of the other and she hits behind me, I'm off balance and I might miss that shot. So always go back to a good ready position, and if you're going forward, jump into that split stance. The next mistake I see players making is they hit too many shots from the back of the court on the rise. So what is hitting on the rise? Hitting on the rise is when I hit the ball as it's on the way up. So that was an on the rise shot. And as you can see, when the ball bounces, it goes up, it reaches a peak, and then it drops. If I'm hitting shots from the back of the court on the rise, it makes it harder for me to hit a clean shot, and it makes it harder for me to be accurate. So what you want to do is you want to hit the ball when it's at its peak. So that looks like this. So I'm letting the ball reach its highest point, then I'm making contact with it. So the main time that you need to be keeping this in mind is after your serve on a third shot. So after your serve, you don't want to be hitting the ball on the rise like I just did there. A good rule of thumb is that the shot after your serve should always be hit at the peak. So even if you need to back up, and a lot of the time if your opponent hits a good return, you might need to back up, you should always try to prevent yourself from hitting the third shot of the rally or the shot after your serve on the rise. So keep in mind, as you're moving forward, you're gonna eventually probably need to take the ball on the rise, so this isn't applied to every shot, mainly the third. If your opponent's hitting roll volleys at your feet, you're gonna have to hit resets and sometimes dinks on the rise so that you can move forward. This is mainly so that you start off your serving points on a good note. The next mistake I see players making is they don't adjust their technique when their opponent's hitting hard or they're playing against a banger. So this is mainly a concern when you're at the kitchen and your opponent is hitting really hard drives from the back. And as you've probably experienced, when somebody hits hard at you from the back, you can't hit as normal of a volley where you're taking a full swing. So if Kennedy takes a full swing at my hard shots, she might mistime the ball and her paddle might shake. So the first thing that you need to keep in mind when you're volleying against a hard shot is you want to take a very compact swing. So if you watch Kennedy's backhand volley, you'll notice she takes a very compact swing when I'm hitting hard, and she's more so blocking the ball. So when you're volleying against a hard shot, you're not swinging, you're punching. So you're not taking a swing from behind your body, you're punching from in front of your body. So as you can see, that makes it a lot easier to defend against the power. The other thing that you need to keep in mind when you're volleying against a hard shot is you're gonna need to squeeze your paddle tighter. So on most shots in pickleball, you wanna have a loose wrist so that you can whip through the ball like we talked about on that serve. But when you're volleying a hard shot, this is the one time, or one of the only times, where you want to have a firm wrist so that your paddle doesn't shake in your hand and you can hit a clean shot. So if you're playing a banger or someone that's hitting hard from the back, don't take a big backswing and have a firm wrist and punch. And if you want to practice the skill of having fast reflexes at home and get better at playing against bangers, I highly recommend checking out a new product, the Dinkmaster Pro, which has a side called the Speedmaster that's fully meant for training your hand speed and getting a higher threshold for handling hard shots. The next mistake players make is they don't use enough lobs to take advantage of their opponent's weak overheads. So if you're hitting your opponent's lobs and you notice that their overheads are not good, they're not very good at backing up, they're not very good at hitting the ball hard, you want to take advantage of them. And there's 3 aspects to doing a good job of this. So you don't want to just randomly lob. The first is when you're going for a lob. So there's two main times to go for a lob, but one of them is the most ideal. So when you're in a dinking rally, a great way for me to change things up is that instead of going for a speed up, I can go for a lob to throw my opponents off. So this is the best time to go for a lob, when you're up and your opponent is also up. It's a lot harder to go for a lob when you're at the back of the court. The second time that it's a good idea to go for a lob is when you're on defense. If you're on defense and your opponent's hitting the ball hard, if they don't have a good overhead, you can go for a lob, and that might get you to reset the point. So if they have a really good overhead, this is probably not a good idea to go for a lob in this time. But I see a lot of players that just don't have good overheads. So if you're on defense, going for a lob is a good way to get back into the point. The first way when we're dinking though is considered an aggressive lob. This is something that you should try to do. The defensive lob is more of a reactive thing. So we're more focused on the lobs from the kitchen. The next part of this though is where you're aiming your lobs. So what you don't want to do when you're hitting a lob, you don't want to just feed it to the person's overhead to where they can smash it. It's a lot more effective to go over your opponent's backhand. So if I'm hitting a lob, I want to try to get it over my opponent's backhand because it's really hard to be offensive from here. If you're playing someone that's under 4.0 level, they almost certainly have zero offense on a high backhand. So by aiming over their backhand, you're making it a lot less likely that they're going to be able to be aggressive if you accidentally hit it too low. But you don't want to hit it too low. You want to try to hit it about a foot above where someone can reach. So that looks like that. A foot above where Kennedy can reach. And why only a foot is because if you go any higher than that, you might hit the ball too far. And so you don't want to hit it too high or else the ball might go out. You're trying to get the ball to land about 2 feet from the baseline. So if we aim too close to the baseline, we might miss. So you want it to go a foot over there where they can reach, and you want it to land 2 feet from the baseline. And the last thing to consider is that when you're hitting a lob, it might make it a little bit easier to go at more of an angle. So you see there, I didn't go fully cross court. I went over her backhand at an angle, because when you hit the ball at an angle, you give yourself more space to work with. You can hit the ball a little bit harder without hitting it long. Just be careful. If I was here and I went for too much of an angle, I'd be hitting it over the person on the left side's forehand where they might be able to smash easier. So try to go over the backhand, but you can also incorporate that angle to give yourself a little bit more room. Building off that last mistake though, the next mistake is that I see way too many players that have bad smashes. So guys, when you have a ball that is above the height of your shoulder and it's slow in pickleball, the point should end within the next shot or two. So if I have a shot up here and I'm letting my opponents back into the point consistently, I'm doing something wrong with my smash. And there's a few mistakes that I see players making that are causing this problem. The first is that when they get lobbed behind them, they don't have a coordinated footwork for getting back quickly so that they can smash the ball. So what this looks like, if I get lobbed, I don't want to backpedal. So this is, no, you don't want to be doing this. That is a recipe for falling over, and it doesn't put you in a position to generate power. What you want to do, it's very simple. You want to turn your shoulders and run like this. So you might only need to take 1 or 2 steps like that, but this is infinitely faster than backpedaling. So it also puts you in a position to hit a really good technique smash. So the way that this looks, I get back quickly and I have turned shoulders and I can hit the ball hard. So you don't want to be backpedaling. You want to be turning your shoulders. It's a lot faster than going back facing the court. The next thing that players do wrong is they have the wrong grip, and that prevents them from extending through the ball. So I have a full video we just made about grips, but what you need to know is you should have either an Eastern grip or a continental grip so that you can snap through the ball, okay? If you don't snap through the ball, you're not gonna get as much power. So watch how hard I can hit with the continental grip. I can hit that pretty much as hard as I can, and it lands in, and it's gonna be hard for anyone to get that ball back because of the speed. So this is the one shot where you can really put some pace on it, and that's gonna make it hard for your opponents to time the ball. So, and the last thing, guys, that players mess up on their smash, this goes back to our tip about watching the ball, is when players are hitting a smash, a lot of the time they drop their head. So this is what you don't want to do. So what I did there, I looked down at where I was hitting the ball as I was hitting it. When you're hitting a smash, you want to continue looking up at the ball until after you've hit it. This prevents you from pulling your paddle down and missing the shot. So when you're hitting that smash, make sure you're always looking up at the ball after you hit it. And guys, These tips also apply to smashes where you're leaning over the kitchen. Obviously, when you're here, you're not gonna have to backpedal, but you still want to look up and not look away when you're hitting the ball, and you still want to be able to snap your wrist too. The next mistake players make though, is they haven't tried putting weight on their paddle, or they're just using a paddle that's way too cheap, not quality, and doesn't have the features that they need to improve. So when I say weight, when you're playing pickleball, you can put little weights like this on the side of your paddle, and that increases the size of your sweet spot, and it gives you more power. So I'd say 90% of people are probably better off with at least a few grams like I have here on the sides. The best spot to start is right above where the paddle curves to go straight. So every paddle shape is a little bit different. This is probably the most common shape. It's the rectangle shape, as we call it. And on this shape, a great spot to start off is right above where the paddle gets straight, because when you do this, it makes the paddle harder to twist, so it increases the twist weight, as we say, but it doesn't increase your ability to go like this as much. So this is the swing weight. When you put the weights here, the sweet spot gets bigger and you get a little bit more power, but it doesn't feel like you're wielding something around that's way heavier. So highly recommend trying putting some weights here. Be careful though, some people, not many people, but some people will get tennis elbow by adding weight to their paddle. So that's the one downside. Also, it might just make you a little bit slower with your reflexes, but highly recommend trying this. It might just make you better immediately. So it's a great tip because it could just make you better right off the bat without any sort of practice. And guys, of course, if you're using a paddle that you got for 20 bucks on Amazon, you're gonna be working with something that doesn't give you as good of a sweet spot, doesn't give you as much power, it's just gonna make you play worse. So if you're looking for a better paddle, we made the Sweet Spot Pro to be the perfect upgrade paddle. So it's only $120 if you use code MISTAKES. And it really has all the best technology. So this is a great deal. And we made it to be top tier. So I don't want to make products that aren't the best of the best. But what we can do is we can actually put them at lower prices because we have an audience. So we put this at $120. It really should be $200. And it's the perfect upgrade for something that you may have gotten on Amazon. When you get this and maybe add some weight to it, you're going to play way better off the bat. And it lasts a long time too. So if you don't have a good paddle right now, highly recommend checking this out. And also recommend putting some weight on if you haven't tried that too. The last mistake, guys, that I see probably almost every single recreational player making is that on one of their shots, if not all of their shots, they have the wrong grip. So there's different grips, ways to hold the paddle if you didn't know that. And you have to understand these if you want to reach your full potential. So this is too big of a tip to talk about in this video. Last week, I made a full video about how to have the right grip in pickleball on every shot. So if you want to check it out, watch this.